sometimes mimi musikazvibata ende musatitide dzungu bambiki kouya anga achizvi consent uyo anga achichamisa as charlatan tanga waisa fesi yako toziva kuti hausi charlatan here ungangoya panapo ngoti munhu ni charlatan wakawandisa fesi.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Taibu, and then Rescue and Mercy. Okay, go on.
Yeah, let me quickly do my submission. Negiga, I don't know how it works. Kuti tinoda kutaura nezvechurch.
The charlatan, are you gonna cry? Are you going to cry?
Toda kutaura nezvechurch.
You are just a fucking ghost, my brother. You are
going to cry?
You got no confidence. Put your face there. Then utaura kuti chamisa as a charlatan.
Two boy.
Let the next speaker speak.
Wait, someone else is presenting. You can. I'll give you a chance, both of you later. Okay? No, two boy. We'll give you another bite, okay? And consent later on.
Yeah. So let's go. Allow me to say it's foolish kuti titaura nezveshoko raMwari kana kuti the Bible or the church. Unless kana tokutaura machechi akawanda. I think mafana define kuti church yamuri kutaura ndeipi. Kune church yaSatan as well. But kana iri church yemuBhayibheri manzwisisiro andinoita, I'm yet still to be corrected, stand to be corrected. Ndeyekuti you cannot discuss about business rechurch yemuBhayibheri. Which I want to believe my apostle and do our claim kuti vanoita more reference to do the reference to the Bible what it says. Like Zveta taxi drivers, I because he didn't reference to the actual script. The actual the church in and I totally agree with two boy. Kuti zvatokuona zvikuitika muZimbabwe. Handiwo machurch biblical church handiwo machurch anofanira kunzi church inomirira inotaura kuda kwaMwari. Where have you seen churches for ED in the Bible? Churches for ED. What does that mean? And zvitotenderwa nemachurches ari muZimbabwe because biblical wakazvivhura paitoita ma1 kuti mati munozvita Old Testament ava just said mati matumwa naMwari upi vanhu vaitoitwa stoned to death. Munhu anomira pamberi pechurch omhura Mwari otaura kuti ndanzwa kuti the same apostle iwawo ndo vakamboti Bob hanzi ndaona hope is Gabriel saka angels and all that bullshit yavaitaura achatonga kusvikira where is the prophet gone now? Mwari vakanyepa saka ndikuti nini there's no point kana tisingati reference to the actual Bible.
Something happened, Taibo.
Ndatopedza kuti there's no point yekuti tikapikisana tisingate reference to the Bible because the Bible can be abused. So zvikuita Obama and all that my examples are not going to take it. Hazvireva kuti it's correct. So we have to agree on that. Hazvireva kuti it's correct. Chauraya machurches kana chauraya shoko raMwari kana kuti chiri kuita blasphemy shoko raMwari it's the church's doctrines. Kuti mapostori anotaura kuti ndarota mwana ane 12 years ari mukadzi wangu ukavhura shoko raMwari rinotokondema izvozvo saka you can't have two masters. There has to be one master. It's either ZANU-PF ndosaka vari comfy ndosaka vasingaudzwi kuti shoko raMwari president rinotaura kuti pakati zvamuri kuita izvi Mwari havazvifarire. The kings akaida kuitwa reference nadesi it did not tell you kuti the same kings were telling those kings kuti zvamurikuita vamwaitaudzwa nzi maita sebenzi aiudzwa idi kunzi waita sebenzi nemunhu waMwari. But can we see that in Zimbabwe? Ukataura izvozvo zvataura two boy unotopindira mujeri kuti wataura kuti idi zvaari kuita zvidiwe naMwari. Ndosaka vese vari kuona vari kunanzvira hakuna. I can challenge you as Ireland kuti ndipei munhu one akambochallenge ED achivhura magwaro achimudza pafair akagara muZimbabwe asina mboatakwa kana kuti asina kusungwa kana asina kutsvagirwa mhosva kana zvichisungisa then there's something it tells you something kuti no we don't serve the same master kana kuti haasi Mwari mumwe chete tine different gods. Thanks. I yield my mind.
Thank you. And then Rescue and Mercy. Okay, and then Leroy after. Go on. Rescue.
Thank you very much. Now it is clear that we are not different in terms of the point of view of Tabo and Tuboy. They have agreed that the church should interfere in politics or vice versa. But however, the issue which they are raising is very correct and pertinent. That there are some churches where the president is going, they are more protected than those particular churches opposing the president. Which is why we have seen church leaderships given cars and money. That was the issue which was there. So for us, we have to be very clear on that. That you see, this regime is now abusing the church by giving them goodies in order for him to get support, which is now in violation of the biblical morals. That is the expectation that is what I was expecting to get from the opposers. That when you go to that extent, then that becomes questionable. So ndosaka ndambotaura chitaura kuti ngatirege kurasa mbereko nekufira. Machurches iwawa watinawa mangwana tichashandisawo kupusha development. There is nothing like that. That is democracy. And even according to our own constitution, or even the national constitution, there is freedom of worship. Nyangwada kunonamata mukadzi wako kumba kuindo vanokubvumira makomo zvese nemuka. Church nyangwada kuita denomination ukada kuita zvipi, no one will challenge you. So this is the time for us as opposition people to capitalize. When ED is going to his way on the ED churches, we should go capitalize on the churches that are negative to that. Otherwise, we are not going to get an answer if we talk about the church of Satan. I heard someone saying there's a church of Satan and there's a church of God. That one is not a discussion that we can finish within one day, because it has been debated millions of years ago, but there is no solution. Maybe we may get the solution on this platform. Ukanzona church ya Mwari upiko wakamboona iwe. Nyangwanzi true God, true church. Yaunoti true church ndeipi, which are the credentials to show that? So that is why I agree with one speaker who came before. He was saying that all we are doing with churches, it is an issue of micromanaging people and controlling the society. Otherwise,
mapostori muchazoashandisa papi chinhu chakatomura kaichi
chachashandisa mapostori
achashanda papi mapostori
tichakuudza mapostori number 1 ukatara mapostori paakatanga kurana mutumwa vaya vaitaurwa vaya vakatanga paliberation struggle yezimbabwe patenda kuti handei tinorwa vaimira vanhu ivavo semapostori ivavo tikawina heduzve asi havana kukwanisa kuzoenda mberi kumodernize their own situation. Ndo patinovashandisira ipapo. So it's like takambovada tichiri kuvada, but now nekuti pana ED hatichaoni zvambotaura kuti ikaipapa pa two boy zvikanzi izvo they are not a true church. Ndaramba inini ndatombovhunika hati yangu yatombotsemuka, ndosaka ndambomira kutombotaura ndandafa ndazomuka, because how can you say church yakamutswa 1945
So what's the measure of a true church? It's not the Bible, my brother.
That's why I'm saying.
Yes,
let me give you the measure. I will give you the measure. The measure is there.
Or not a true church?
Yes.
Good afternoon. I hope you're all well. Sorry to mute you. Hello there, John Babish. I'm only here for a couple of minutes because I thought maybe we can redirect this conversation to answer maybe a couple of questions. One of which is, are we discussing ideals or are we discussing the status quo? Because I think maybe that's a starting point for us to try and flesh out the subject. And I think by doing so, maybe tinozotange kutaura later about zvirikuitika kana tadifferentiate with the difference between what we expect things to be and what they are. So I'm hoping kuti, for my benefit and maybe for others that are trying to understand this topic, if we can sort of try and start from that point of view and then work our way up to maybe our own political biases, that might be very helpful. I don't know if you agree, John Babish.
Yeah, look, I think you might have come in a bit late, but I think that background of where the church came in and where we are at and how some kind of institutions are now taking advantage of the church and using church in politics. I think we've established that. But I think what we are doing at the moment, it's more like submissions around what people believe in that. But it's a very difficult debate because people are actually articulating their views on what they believe. I think in our context right now, there has been some abuse of what the church is supposed to be doing, such that we are in a society which is being misled by politicians using the name of the church, such that the value of the church has lost its relevance. But continue. I like you to, because Marcy is supposed to be next, but continue. You can rearrange some of the speakers. I've been holding on and I'm still around. We are all sharing. I know you said you're going to be going later, but it's a very good debate. So far, I wouldn't want to take any sides as a co-host because there are some who are coming in with their different views. So church is very complicated as an institution and what we believe in. Some people might say they're benefiting from it. Some people are saying maybe someone is being taken advantage of. But carry on with that, host. I'm more than happy for you to redirect the conversation.
Thank you very much, John Bishop. Before I unmute everyone, I think maybe if we start off, I know that other people have dropped off and come back on the space. And also, I appreciate that you've explained that this has already been touched on. But I think maybe for the benefit of those that have just joined, and also because the subject matter in itself is emotive, maybe we could try and redirect the conversation as we go along. That would be very, very helpful, because I do think that it is a crucial conversation to be had, and there's a lot to discuss. So I think, Marcy, if you go next, if I give you a lineup, and then we'll do it that way. So if we have Marcy, and then we'll have King P, and then we'll have Leroy, and then Risk, and then I think that's all for now. And then Kuma Sowe as well, you can come last if that's okay. Thank you very much. Let's just try and have a discussion with less interruptions. I understand interruptions happen because there needs to be clarity, but let's try and keep that to a minimal. Thank you very much, guys.
Co-host, you cut me. I was the one who was speaking.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
So,
okay, please finish off Kuma Risk if that's possible, and then we'll go to Marcy. Apologies. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I was talking to Tabo. What is a true church? By which definition? Maybe I will use the definition of Zimbabwe Constitution, that there is a freedom of worship. Any church that is registered is a true church. And therefore, to pinpoint that, this one, they are reading this and that will be a nightmare. And as I conclude, I was saying that Mapostori are kutaura, or are denigrate now. They struggled in the history of Zimbabwe. If you can check, Vana Johanne Marange, ndo pauri kuona pa liberation struggle paanga vari vaitwista their church teachings to support the liberation struggle, and they had their way. That is why we are here in terms of the independence of these people. But someone is saying today they are wrong. Maybe some few leaders vapuwa maakwa, they are manipulated. Makutaura church yese yakasumudza vanhu vese pamweni mamillions, ende munhu ari kutaura achada kuitawo MP arida kutovhoterwa futi nevanhu ivavo ari kutaura sezvo. Saka when you are dealing like what you say, co-host, that the issue of the church is very delicate to talk about, because we cannot reach a conclusion. There is no one who can win it. So let's allow freedom of worship. Go and worship your wife at home. You can worship your husband. You can worship even your animals, your dog, That's the essence of the constitution of Zimbabwe. So don't come and tell us that you are a false church because you are worshiping ancestors, because that is according to the constitution of Zimbabwe. Don't tell me that I'm wrong because I'm worshiping the mountains. The constitution allows me to do so. So that's the issue. Thank you very much. I'm happy that you are bringing order. Thank you.
Marcy, over to you.
Yeah, I'll probably maybe confuse things, but I hope people will follow. Church and politics. We are creating a relationship between two things that have a common interest, which is people. And that is where the quagmire lies. The church also is a gatherer of human resources for a purpose, which is a goal. Naturally, the church professes to be taking them to the afterlife, which is perfect, and then controlling their conduct in this present life using doctrine, belief, faith, and so forth and so forth. And it also creates a power structure in the organograms of their groupings, creating an institution. Politics also relies on the same group of people because they share the geography. So they are all tapping into human resources. Power controls. Doctrine dictates the pace, behavior, attitude, and an exchange is done. Unfortunately, we cannot say biblically, because in the church sphere, some churches do not follow the biblical. They follow doctrine, and some follow dogma that they have created by their union. The church historically has stood in the side of its dogma, its doctrines, and its faith, and influences politics so that it can construct a state and a status from the nation of people that they control to mimic what they like. Politics, in turn, depends on the same human resources also to behave, have attitudes, and give back to them the power so that they can control the state and that nation in the way that they prefer. Ideally, as a people, we want the church to influence power to achieve what we, the human resources that make the church, want. And then we use our dogma to say, is the state behaving in a way that allows us freedom? That the dogma of our church or the doctrine of our church dictates, so that we can feel that spiritually and faith-wise, we are facilitated to live the life that we want. We have been fortunate historically that is the churches that we are seeing being commandeered now have stood in the side of people against entities that want to form themselves as the control agent of states. So if you go back to how Mapostoli Church was, the Mapostoli Zion and all the other churches are resistant groups. The Mapostoli Faith Church was as a result of being anti-establishment, based on what the establishment was also attempting to create as dogma, as what it was trying to profess as doctrinal. And they stepped away to represent the constituents of people that they were made up of. They wanted to represent their spirituality. That's why you see them injecting the African beliefs into their practice, into their existence, and into their enlightenment. They defended their being. They humanized themselves and said, this entity, whilst it brings its own doctrines and dogma, they are anti our way of life. So we exist outside of it. And that's why they looked at the things that would be disadvantageous for them and created a dogma that was against that. The Apostolic Church, when it says we are anti-buildings, that was a response in resistance to the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, which was now appropriating human labor for building of that, and they considered it slavery. They were also against the behavior within the building that they felt was curtailing their freedom of worship. So the church, the Catholic, Methodist, American Episcopal, all the other ones that were there were restricting them in the way that they should worship. Hosho hadzibvumirwe, mbira hadzibvumirwe, kushedzera hakubvumirwe, dancing hakubvumirwe. And they said, no, for me to elevate myself, to tap to the higher power, I need all those things for my meditative state. So how will I be able to touch Mwari if I cannot access him nenzira yandakajaira, nzira yandakaita that works for me? And what is the purpose of this Mwari if I cannot out of myself heal myself, prosper myself, protect myself? Because the church wasn't giving them back that. Now they would go to church and it is the mfundisi that would read them the Bible. They can't see the world. They can't be their own prophets. They cannot see visions from Mwari. They are dependent. And they said, this is restrictive. Therefore, we will not be held back by a building. So Pauri, that's why they are resistant to the fact, to the point of saying, we will worship Mwari wedu anywhere we want it. Pasi pegomo, pamusoro pegomo, kurwizi, pandakamira mumba mangu, mukicheni, outside in a tree. They are resisting this religion that tells them how they should worship, who they should worship, when they should worship, only on a Sunday, only with a book. That's why they even throw the book and says, Mwari can talk to me directly, and it can talk to people from our race. That's why a person from their race says, Inini mbune, I have spoken to. So they are defending. So from our perspective, historically, we've always used the church to step out of the establishment, anti-establishment, for the representation of people. Then we have these new, what we call new churches, the ones we imported from colonialism. They also, unfortunately, have that stance of saying God directs them. Their biblical God directs them for the protection of people. But for what purpose? To get that human resource closer to him in their way of life so they can access the afterlife, which is the promised heaven, blah, blah, blah. And the church steps in to say no to what? Disenfranchisement, inequality, fights for equity, and things like that. The downtrodden. That's why I think research was citing people like Moses, etc., etc. You see that the church steps in for the protection of people. In our case, when we now say the politics is the one that goes into the church, we are saying the establishment is appropriating the church for its means. And when we get oppressive governments, because of that human capital, power relies on the human capital. It is a pillar of power. Unfortunately, because church is made up of human beings by their actions create leverage for power, which is institutional, political, to appropriate even your deviances to use against you and blackmail. The way I look at how the church in Zimbabwe has been commandeered, it is a hostage situation. There is something that their leaders have done that have made their congregants vulnerable to the leadership being captured. And because the leadership has captured the church itself, it now offers politics the human resources. So the congregants are at the mercy based on the deviancy of their leaders. Everybody knows that some doctrines that have been misinterpreted by some of the churches that have been commandeered are anti the constitution of Zimbabwe. And most of those leaders have been found wanting of doing what? Of going against the constitution of Zimbabwe. Child marriages is something that their leadership has constantly done and partakes in. Now they can be used by the establishment to say, if you don't conform to me, I will arrest you. And I will also arrest your congregants because you are against, you are pushing this. Some of them are criminals. They've used the church criminally. And the state, based on how the state is structured, has information about those people within the church. And based on their position, they can be commandeered. And their deviance is used to say, donate your congregants to me. Otherwise, I will crush the system. But between the two, the relationship, now there will be carrot and stick. Sometimes the establishment uses coercion because politics is the art of convincing people. And it has gone into that church with carrot and sticks, which is what politics does. And because of the vulnerability of our churches in Zimbabwe, the moral fiber, the spiritual fiber, the traditional fiber, and the cultural fiber of our state and our nationhood has been eroded by oppression to the point where now it is the apt position for the establishment to commandeer it. But doctrinally, most of our churches are not for the establishment. They are anti-establishment entities. Unfortunately, the human nature has made them vulnerable to the state. So I think it's Rescue who cited, even in the establishment of our Zimbabwean state, from Zimbabwe Rhodesia to the actual Zimbabwe now, you have seen the establishment commandeer the church. Our first president was Zion Gumede, who is also a bishop. Then we have got Archbishop Muzorewa. Then we also have the clergy, who is Banana. So it's not an unfamiliar territory where we are. Unfortunately, the new church seems to be pro-establishment than anti-establishment for the people. So we should not tamwa the church. We should go back into the church and re-establish what the true standing is, the relationship between people and the entity which controls them, the incumbent political party. We need to claim back our church, but to do that, we must clean our morality, our culture, our spirituality.